Even in the vast chronicle vaults of the Imperium, where data glyphs flicker like dying stars and dust settles upon forgotten tomes, there are moments whose significance is felt only by those patient enough to study the slow turning of epics. I had not sought revelation when I descended into the archive spire beneath the shattered basilica of Charon's Reach, yet the whispering lumen panels and half-burned incense seemed to sense my purpose. They illuminated a single corridor sealed for centuries, its locks fused by age rather than war. As I stepped through, motes of ancestral ash drifted around me, drifting like memories awakened. There, amid cracked stone and abandoned cogitators, I found a data slate so plain it might have been overlooked by generations of scholars. But its simplicity made it dangerous. Inside it lay accounts dismissed by most chroniclers, incidents too minor to warrant attention, yet potent enough to shape destinies. As I activated the slate, its pale glow revealed truths that tugged gently, insistently, at the fabric of the Millennium's fate. The first account emerged with a hiss of static, resolving into a series of entries penned by an unnamed field scrivener stationed on the frontier world of Atlantis Tertius. His notes described no grand uprising, no battle fit for statues that lined the imperial palace. Instead, he wrote of a night when the wind shifted, carrying with a resonance he could not name. A minor astropath collapsed from the strain of decoding its meaning, whispering of distant thunder in the warp. The garrison commander dismissed the event as atmospheric distortion, and the report died in the usual tide of bureaucratic neglect. Yet the scrivener lingered on one detail, a single pic capture taken moments before the anomaly faded. In its blurred image, a constellation shimmered in a configuration unseen for 10,000 years. Most would call it coincidence. Yet as I studied the trembling strokes of the scrivener's handwriting, I sensed he had glimpsed a pattern whose echoes would reach far beyond that quiet frontier, rippling through destinies that had not yet taken shape. The second entry was older, its sigils marked in an archaic dialect favored during the earliest centuries after the Great Crusade. It told of a merchant void ship drifting near the halo stars, its holds filled with mundane cargo, grain, machine parts, ceremonial oils, nothing to draw the eye of inquisitors or smugglers. But in the ship's final transmission, recorded moments before it vanished without trace, the Vox Master spoke of a geometric shadow passing across the vessel's prow. He described it not as a creature or construct, but as an absence so complete it consumed starlight. His calm tone unsettled me more than any scream could have. He sounded like a man reporting routine void traffic rather than the unraveling of his fate. Scholars later blamed a warp storm or misjump, dismissing the recording as corrupted data. Yet as I listened, I noted a faint undertone in the signal, an oscillation that matched no known interference pattern. It lingered like an echo of some silent observer brushing against real space before slipping back into unreachable depths. The final account on the slate belonged to an officer of the Astra Militarum station during a minor skirmish on a swamp world, whose name had long since eroded from official records. He wrote with a soldier's practicality, detailing troop movements, ammunition shortages, and the suffocating humidity that clung to every breath. But between the lines of his otherwise austere report, a single moment emerged like a wound in the narrative. On the fourth night of the engagement, as the mist rolled across the marsh, he saw a figure standing upon a ridge far beyond Lasgun range. The figure held no weapon, wore no armor, and radiated neither threat nor alliance. It simply observed, unmoving, as though measuring the resolve of the soldiers below. The officer attempted to approach, but each step brought new layers of fog, veiling the stranger like a deliberate defense. By dawn, the ridge was empty. Command dismissed his account as a stress-induced hallucination, yet he recorded the figure's silent presence with unwavering conviction. As I pieced together these obscure incidents, a quiet dread crept into my thoughts. They shared no geography, no time frame, no common adversary, and yet they resonated with the same faint tremor, an undercurrent too subtle for most historians to perceive. I felt the archives shift around me, as though the basilica itself recognized the significance I was beginning to unravel. The walls bore the scars of forgotten battles, their fractures glinting beneath the cold light of malfunctioning lumen strips. Every shadow seemed to lean closer, as if listening. These were not catastrophes that reshaped star systems, nor revelations that toppled empires. They were gentle alterations in the vast machinery of fate, barely noticeable, yet capable of directing whole legions toward triumph or oblivion. Each event served as a reminder that history is shaped not solely by heroes and tyrants, but by moments so small they vanish from official remembrance before their impact is understood. I close the data slate, its glow dimming like the last breath of a dying ember, yet the weight of its revelations remained. Though the basilica's silence pressed upon me, I sensed a faint stir of movement in the far corridors, as if the archives themselves exhaled the dust of centuries in cautious anticipation. The overlooked incidents I had uncovered were not isolated curiosities. They were the first threads of a pattern whose full shape lay just beyond perception, waiting for the patient or the desperate to discover it. For a moment, I hesitated, uncertain whether to delve deeper into the sealed halls or retreat to the relative safety of the upper spires. But history does not yield its truths to the timid. With a final glance at the cracked stone and the dimming incense coils, I stepped toward the next darkened passage, compelled by the quiet certainty that the forgotten would soon demand remembrance. The corridor deepened as I advanced, narrowing into a vault where ancient cogitators loomed like slumbering giants. Their rusted frames, draped in cables that curled like ossified serpents, hummed with a faint energy that should not have persisted after centuries of neglect. A single lumen flickered overhead, casting an anemic glow upon a dais in the center of the chamber. Resting upon it was a hololithic projector shaped in the old Mechanicus style, angled brass, sigil-etched gears, and a glass eye that glimmered with dormant menace. Dust coated its casing, yet its activation rune pulsed as though it had sensed my arrival. With a hesitant touch, I awakened the device, and a sphere of pale red light unfolded above it, swirling with locked data fragments. As the hollow stabilized, it offered not a summary but an invitation, a sequence of linked accounts stretching far deeper than those contained in the first slate. These were the stories that had been buried intentionally, hidden not due to irrelevance, but because their subtlety threatened more powerful narratives. The first image coalesced into the form of an imperial cartographer from the days preceding the Nova Terra Interregnum. His records detailed a series of minor warp, eddies drifting near the lesser Perseid routes. Most navigators had dismissed these anomalies as common disturbances, yet the cartographer recognized an unsettling pattern. Each eddy aligned perfectly with the projected paths of several rogue warbands. Their ships vanished after entering the zone, not in bursts of catastrophic failure, but in a silent stasis of halted momentum. The vessels were found months later, drifting without crew, their hulls etched with sigils that defied identification. The cartographer attempted to raise alarm within the administratum, but his appeals vanished into bureaucratic black holes, consumed by superiors unwilling to acknowledge anything beyond their ledgers. Whether the anomalies were the work of a hidden xenospecies or the aftershocks of some forgotten psychic convulsion, the official silence ensured that the true cause remained unresolved, leaving only ghost ships and the hollow certainty that something patient had been testing the Imperium's attention. The hollow blurred, shifting to reveal a secondary narrative, this one tied to a renegade astrotelepath from the distant reaches of the Ghoul stars. The records described him not as a villain or martyr, but as a man cursed by clarity. Unlike most astropaths, who struggled against the warp's agony, he perceived melodies within its chaos, repeating cadences that rose and fell like an unseen choir. Over decades, he compiled these patterns, believing they formed a language older than humanity's first steps among the stars. Though he warned that the melodies had begun to quicken, few listened, dismissing his theories as delusions induced by long exposure to the immaterium. Yet his final transmission, encoded in a series of harmonic pulses, detailed an event both minor and catastrophic, a shift in the cosmic choir, a single dissonant note that split the pattern into discord. His death followed days later, but the pulses remained locked within Mechanicus vaults. As I watched the projection, I felt an echo of those frequencies, as though the vault itself resonated with lingering traces of that impossible melody. From the swirling light emerged another figure, this one clad in the austere vestments of an imperial remembrancer. Her face bore an expression of relentless curiosity, and her notes revealed a discovery made during a long-forgotten crusade. Amid the ruins of a nameless world, she had uncovered a monument chiseled with human features despite predating human settlement by millennia. The statue's eyes were hollow, yet its posture conveyed vigilance, as though guarding something buried deep below. Her commanders dismiss the structure as primitive debris, but she sensed intent behind its design. Excavation revealed tunnels that spiraled downward into caverns filled with crystalline formations shaped like frozen screams. The remembrancer recorded her impressions with precise unease, describing an atmosphere heavy with mourning. Before the expedition withdrew, she uncovered a final chamber containing a fragmentary mural depicting humanity's fall not at the hands of alien horrors, but from an internal rupture so devastating that time itself recoiled. Her superiors ordered the cavern sealed, erasing the site from all maps, yet her testimony endured in secret archives. Whether prophecy or misinterpretation, the mural's implication lingered like a prickling question. The hollow dimmed before blooming into its final sequence, a chronicle written by a low-ranking sergeant stationed on a fortress moon near the Cyclopean storm front of the Maelstrom. His account began mundanely, describing ration shortages and routine drills, yet his tone shifted when he described an encounter during a night patrol. He had paused upon a parapet overlooking the storm-racked expanse, watching lightning ignite the churning warp maelstrom. Amid the chaos, he glimpsed an organized lattice of light threading through the storm, as though some immense structure existed within the swirling madness. For several minutes, the pattern remained stable, revealing what resembled corridors and chambers woven from raw immaterium. The sergeant alerted his commander, who dismissed it as an illusion created by fatigue. Yet he returned nightly, compelled by something between fear and longing. Over time, the lattice reappeared with increasing clarity, each manifestation revealing additional complexity. On the final night of his watch, he described a shadow moving behind the warp-formed architecture, vast, deliberate, and aware. His narrative ended abruptly mid-sentence, followed by an official note declaring him lost to the storm. No search was conducted. The hollow collapsed into darkness, leaving only the dormant brass machine staring upward like a blind oracle. Each account I had witnessed shared the quiet potency of the earlier incidents, yet here the deeper patterns sharpened into focus. These were not random curiosities scattered across millennia. They were coordinated tremors in the bedrock of fate, threads woven by unseen manipulators whose reach exceeded imperial paranoia. What unsettled me most was not the content of the stories, but the realization that someone had gathered them deliberately and hidden them where only the most persistent seeker would find them. The vault's silence pressed inward as I considered this intention, heavy with unspoken warnings. I could feel the air shift, carrying a faint scent of ozone as though the warp itself leaned close, eager to see whether I would advance or retreat. As the last echo of the hollow faded, I understood with chilling clarity that the deeper archives awaited, holding truths capable of unraveling the certainty of any who dared seek them. I descended deeper into the archive spire, guided not by confidence, but by the subtle gravitational pull of converging secrets. The air thickened with metallic tang, as though the vault inhaled warp-tainted residue from some distant epoch. Every step echoed between towering shells of brittle parchment and data crystals whose surfaces flickered with untranslated glyphs. I sensed an intelligence woven into the silence, neither hostile nor welcoming, merely observant. The deeper I ventured, the more the previous accounts coalesced into an unsettling hypothesis. These overlooked events were not isolated disturbances, but fragments of a larger tapestry, stitched by hands that preferred anonymity to dominion. The archive seemed to pulse with this realization, as if the ancient stones themselves acknowledged the presence of a listener prepared to confront the implications. At the vault's heart stood a circular chamber engraved with concentric rings, each etched with symbols too archaic for immediate recognition. A single pedestal rose from the center, bearing a crystal cylinder sealed with locking mechanisms that resembled talons. Its glow was soft but insistent, like a heartbeat preserved in stasis. When I released the first seal, the cylinder hummed with restrained potential, projecting a faint halo that illuminated the inscriptions circling the chamber. These markings resolved themselves into a pattern of interconnected timelines, each branching event annotated with terse notes. As I deciphered the overlapping fragments, the theory took shape. The Imperium's most monumental catastrophes were often preceded by quiet anomalies, subtle distortions in fate that foreshadowed greater upheavals. Someone had mapped these precursors, recognizing them a pattern invisible to most scholars. One of the timelines described a minor psychic surge recorded on a barren moon shortly before the awakening of a long-slumbering Xenos empire. Another traced the disappearance of a merchant vessel to the eventual eruption of a sector-wide heresy whose origins remain murky even in official histories. These correlations were not coincidences but warning signs, small tremors signaling titanic shifts. Yet the archivists who assembled this knowledge did not name the underlying cause. Instead, they left layered annotations expressing uncertainty, speculation, and dread. Theories abounded: an emergent warp intelligence, an unseen pantheon of forgotten entities, or perhaps humanity's own subconscious manifested across the immaterium. The notes did not endorse any conclusion, suggesting instead that the truth lay somewhere beyond the reach of sanctioned inquiry. The next cluster of annotations described a phenomenon that resonated with the accounts I had already encountered. The archivist identified recurring observers, figures who appeared at pivotal moments without interfering, silent witnesses lingering at the edges of calamity. These descriptions echoed the lone figure on the Swamp World Ridge, the shadow within the Maelstrom's lattice, and the geometric void drifting to the halo stars. The archivist speculated that these entities existed across multiple temporal layers, appearing when reality's fabric thin enough to reveal their presence. Whether they were agents of the warp, remnants of an extinct precognitive species, or manifestations of fate itself remained uncertain. Yet their recurrence implied purpose. Observation without action suggested judgment, as though the galaxy's unfolding tragedies served as tests administered by an unseen tribunal. A deeper note proposed an even more unsettling hypothesis. The observers might not be separate beings at all, but projections of humanity's collective destiny given form by psychic pressure. If true, then every unseen figure, every silent watcher, represented a possible future collapsing into the present to assess its own emergence. It was an idea bordering on heresy, but its elegance held a sinister allure. The archivist wrestled with the notion, acknowledging its danger yet unable to dismiss its explanatory power. A final annotation in this cluster admitted that the observers seemed neither benevolent nor malignant, merely curious. Curiosity, however, in entities capable of shaping or predicting cataclysm, posed its own threat. The cylinder's projection shifted, revealing contradictions that the archivist had struggled to reconcile. Some anomalies preceded disasters, while others followed victories that stabilized entire regions. In certain cases, the anomalies seemed to prevent catastrophic outcomes, subtly nudging commanders or psychers toward decisions they might otherwise have avoided. This duality confounded the archivist's attempts to ascribe motive. The entities, if indeed they were responsible, did not pursue a single agenda. Their actions, or their lack thereof, suggested a perspective so alien that notions of salvation or destruction were irrelevant. The archivist theorized that the observers operated on principles incomprehensible to mortals constrained by linear time and finite perception. Their presence indicated interest, not intervention, leaving humanity to interpret their silent judgment as best it could. I studied the final sequence, a series of overlapping diagrams mapping the ebb and flow of warp currents across millennia. These diagrams highlighted moments when the warp's tides shifted with subtle but unprecedented precision. These shifts aligned with the anomalies, forming a pattern resembling a slow, deliberate pulse. The archivist speculated that this pulse reflected a larger intelligence embedded within the warp, not a conscious deity, but a self-organizing phenomenon arising from eons of psychic resonance. If the warp possessed such emergent awareness, then every anomaly, every melody heard by the renegade astrotelepath, every geometric shadow crossing a ship's path, might represent an attempt to communicate. Or perhaps it was simply the warp dreaming, unaware of the consequences of its restless stirrings. As the projection dimmed, I felt the chamber constrict around me, as though the air itself recoiled from the implications. If these overlooked incidents were expressions of a larger pattern, then the galaxy's catastrophes were echoes of an intelligence both omnipresent and indifferent. The Imperium fought wars on fronts visible and invisible, yet the greatest conflict might be the struggle to understand forces that shape destinies without revealing their intentions. The archivist's final transmission scrolled across the cylinder's fading light, a message acknowledging futility of seeking definitive answers, yet affirming the necessity of continued inquiry. Their last words urged anyone who found the archive to proceed with both courage and caution, for knowledge of the unseen carried dangers equal to ignorance. The cylinder's glow vanished, leaving only faint luminescence from the engraved rings beneath my feet. I stepped back, absorbing the weight of the theories that now intertwined with my own understanding. The vault's silence pressed in once more, but now it felt charged with anticipation. The deeper mysteries beckoned from beyond the next sealed door, promising revelations that might either illuminate hidden truths or dissolve reason entirely. I steadied my breath, knowing that retreat would leave these questions to fester in the dark, while advancement offered only the uncertain gift of greater clarity. The sealed door recognized my presence with a shudder, as though awakened from a dream that had endured for millennia. Dust drifted from its seams as ancient locks disengaged, releasing a low groan that reverberated through the chamber like a lament. Beyond it lay a corridor so narrow the shadows clung to its walls with human insistence. As I stepped forward, I sensed the archives adjusting around me, acknowledging my decision to confront whatever truths had woven themselves through forgotten accounts. Each breath tasted of iron, reminding me that some revelations demanded a price not measured in blood alone. The corridor opened into a chamber lit by a pale radiance that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. Its walls were carved with reliefs depicting figures caught in moments of quiet significance, the kind of scenes historians overlook because they offer no triumph, no tragedy, only transition. I traced my fingers across one carving, feeling grooves worn by others who had stood here long before me. Their presence lingered like a faint warmth, urging me to read the symbols etched beneath the reliefs. These inscriptions spoke of thresholds, of silent influences shaping destiny through pressure rather than overt intervention. At the chamber's center rested a pedestal bearing a codex bound in darkened metal. Its cover bore no sigil, yet the air surrounding it trembled with restrained meaning. When I opened it, the pages revealed diagrams tracking the delicate convergences that preceded galaxy-shaking events. The author's script moved with meticulous certainty, connecting seemingly irrelevant episodes into coherent patterns. Each diagram illustrated how minute fractures in probability could redirect entire legions, or doom worlds through decisions made in passing. This codex did not prophesy. It analyzed, laying bare the mechanisms by which unnoticed forces sculpted the path of history for all. Yet what unsettled me most were the final pages, where the author shifted from analysis to contemplation. They wrote of an unseen presence guiding these convergences, not with malice or grace, but with detached curiosity. This presence, whether entity or phenomenon, appeared only when reality thinned enough to allow its attention to slip through. The author theorized that it learned from observing humanity's reactions, adjusting its subtle pressures to test the integrity of mortal resolve. If true, then the overlooked events were not accidents of fate, but deliberate probes, measuring the resilience of an empire drowning in its own enormity. I closed the codex, feeling the weight of each possibility settling upon my thoughts like accumulating ash. The archives grew colder, as though the spire itself listened for my conclusion. Doubt whispered that the author's theories bordered on madness. Yet another voice within me recognized coherence beneath their speculation. These subtle forces, whatever their nature, had shaped the Imperium's course far more intimately than any Primarch's decree or tyrant's ambition. If humanity remained blind to their presence, then it risked stumbling into catastrophes engineered not by foes, but by its own inability to perceive the quiet architecture of destiny before all. A tremor ran through the chamber, subtle yet decisive, as though the archives themselves rejected hesitation. The luminance dimmed, creating a corridor of darkness leading deeper into the spire. I felt the weight of expectation pressing against my shoulders, urging me toward the unseen depths. This was no longer mere research. It had become a pilgrimage into the unseen machinery guiding the Imperium's fate. Each step forward either courted revelation or madness, though the boundary between them had grown indistinct. As I crossed the threshold of darkness, I sensed that the archives would grant no further retreat, only progression now. The passage narrowed until it felt like walking to the throat of a slumbering titan. The air vibrated with low resonance, pulsing in slow intervals that matched neither heartbeat nor machine rhythm. Ahead, a faint glow revealed a final chamber carved in perfect symmetry, its floor inscribed with spirals that converge upon a single central point. At that point hovered a sphere of soft radiance, neither artifact nor apparition. Its light shifted with the cadence of thought, responding to my approach. I realized it represented the culmination of the archivist's search, the source from which all theories had drawn significance. I approached the sphere cautiously, sensing neither hostility nor welcome. Its radiance enveloped me in gentle luminescence, revealing shifting images within its surface. I saw glimpses of the earlier anomalies, the constellation over Volanus Tertius, the drifting void ship, the figure on a marshland ridge, each framed not as isolated moments, but as components of a larger structure. The sphere pulsed with awareness, not conscious in a mortal sense, yet undeniably attentive. It conveyed no message, offered no prophecy. Instead, it waited for interpretation, leaving the burden of understanding upon the observer. Its silence felt heavier than any spoken revelation to us all. A realization settled slowly into my thoughts. The sphere did not exist to answer questions, but to amplify them. It functioned as a mirror for the mind, shaping the anomalies into patterns drawn from the viewer's own fears and insights. The archivist had likely reached the same conclusion, leaving the codex as a testament to their attempt at comprehension. I felt the sphere's radiance drawing me inward, urging me to confront the uncertainties at the heart of history. These overlooked events were not seeds of doom or hope alone. They were crossroads, demanding awareness before their consequences unfolded before me. As the sphere dimmed, releasing me from its luminous grasp, I understood that no archivist, no emperor, no prophet could dictate the meaning of what I had seen. The power lay not in prediction but in recognition, the ability to sense the subtle tremors preceding monumental change. The archives offered no final counsel, only the knowledge that vigilance mattered more than certainty. I turned from the sphere, carrying its silent challenge within me. Whatever forces shaped these overlooked events would continue their work, indifferent to comprehension, yet undeniably influential. In their quiet wake, the fate of the Millennium would tremble,